It's the week beginning Monday the 2nd of March, and this is Business Unwrapped, brought to you by Lombard Asset Finance. In this bonus series of podcasts, I've been talking to industry experts about innovation and agility in the age of disruption. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the business week. And joining me today from the week's digital team is Arion McNicoll, and our special guest this week is digital sociologist Lisa Talia Moretti. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, you head up user research and lecture on digital research methods at Goldsmiths and Cardiff University. I'm trying to imagine then, what does a week look like for you?
Very busy. So I teach one day a week at Goldsmiths, where I teach the master students who are studying management of innovation. And then the rest of my time is spent at Methods, where I head up a user research team that's based here in London and in Birmingham. And we work with a range of private sector clients on the digital transformation of public services.
Because digital sociology is a field a lot of people just will be completely unfamiliar with. In a nutshell, what is it?
So there's only about, I think, 17 or 18 people in the world who have a master's degree in digital sociology. So I'm very fortunate to be one of those people. Digital sociologists essentially study what emerges at the intersection of computing or technology, media, and social theory and social life.
So what technology is doing to our society?
The impact that tech has on society and also the changing nature of the relationship that people have with technology. Yes.
Okay, well, perhaps by the end of this podcast, there'll be more people that are applying for masters in digital sociology.
Excellent.
What story have you brought us?
Is it time to bring AI into A&E?
AI and machine learning are directly applicable to the surveillance and monitoring and response to coronavirus. There's huge amounts of information of people talking about cases, reporting on events. If we can start to mine that information with new AI tools, we can actually get important signals of things happening in populations that would be important from a response perspective. That information in itself can be incredibly valuable for the WHO, for public health agencies like the CDC, as they try to really get a grip on how this outbreak is evolving.
Professor John Brownstein talking to QuickTake by Bloomberg. Lisa, what's he on about?
So this is about coronavirus and how researchers are using the power of big data to predict the spread of coronavirus that is happening around the world.
Okay.
So what they're doing is basically they're able to scrape huge amounts of open data, so data that's coming from the open web. So that includes blogs, news websites, social media, and start to understand how people are talking about this virus, how people are reporting how it's being broken out in these different places and how it's moving and spreading across the world. And they are then able to start predicting patterns of where it could potentially appear next.
Okay, so when you're actually tracing a pandemic in the future, AI might be helping to plot that out. At the moment, though, does the technology really exist to do it, reasonably?
This is a part of a method that's called social listening. And so what social listening is essentially using software tools that have inbuilt machine learning and AI to be able to pick up certain keywords that are being discussed online and then start to trace those. I think they have done very well for this latest virus and to track this, but we will be able to do even better in future, because now this is almost like a beta of like trialing this kind of method and to see how it's being spread across the world. But now that we know that the power of data has the ability for us to do this, I imagine researchers will be starting to use this method much more often in future.
I don't get it, though, because I'd understand, obviously, if GPs start reporting, I've had a case of coronavirus, then a big computer can put all that data together on a map. But if you're looking at things people are saying on Twitter, for example, people are tweeting jokes about coronavirus. People are tweeting about it because it's a very popular news story. That doesn't mean they've got it.
So this is where the huge challenge with this method comes in, because there's huge amounts of data. You have to be able to discern signal from noise. And as we know, social networks are ripe for spreading misinformation and fake news. So this is one of the huge challenges in using this type of technology. And I think what a lot of the news reports fail to really accurately represent is the role that humans actually are playing in monitoring this and using AI to be able to augment decision making, so not necessarily replace decision making. So there are actually a huge number of teams who are taking all of this information, looking at the patterns and the predictions that the AI is providing, and are having to actually conduct further investigations and also to prioritize what kind of predictions they really want to follow through on. We can't go and just chase every single thing that comes through in the machine. There's a huge number of teams who are actually doing these deeper investigations with the World Health Organization.
So, Arion, when it comes to business then, looking at AI more generally and integrating AI into your business, that is something to consider, isn't it? A lot of employees think if we start using AI, I'm going to lose my job. But Lisa's saying, no, you need people as well.
You absolutely do. And I think a lot of organizations and a lot of media outlets can be accused of being a little bit woolly with what AI actually is. One of the things that it isn't yet is the thing that some people call artificial general intelligence, which is the idea of robots, that we have seen manifest on the silver screen, like in films like Terminator and Blade Runner and so on, where the robot is capable of some sort of semblance of human thought. AI today, still some pockets of it strive for that sort of manifestation of machine learning, but where we are is rather more narrow than that. And I think that people, there's lots of opportunities for places where AI could be useful, but it does still need to involve humans feeding machines not only data sets, but then methodologies to process those sorts of data sets.
But those are different humans, aren't they, Lisa? I mean, it's all very well saying, don't fear for your job because it needs humans. It needs different humans. It needs humans who are nerds, basically, at the moment. If you're doing a job where you're doing data inputting, that's different to a job where you're interpreting data.
Yeah, so a nice way to kind of think about this difference between machine intelligence and human intelligence is that human intelligence is all about unstructured problem solving. So kind of really two key skills that stand out in that is creativity and critical thinking. When it comes to machine intelligence, it's much more about structured problem solving, so pattern recognition, statistical reasoning. When it comes to working, so the kind of collaboration that's required between humans and machines, very often we need to start finding these people who work at the intersection. So, for instance, in the case of coronavirus, you actually need people who understand epidemiology, the spread of viruses, but then you also need people who understand biology, but who also understand what AI can do. And there are actually very few people in the world, I'm going to hazard a guess, who work at the intersection of biology and AI or epidemiology and AI. So there is actually, in the world of business today and like just generally speaking in life, to use this technology actually requires not just necessarily multidisciplinary teams, but multidisciplinary individuals.
And younger people? I mean, I'm generalizing here. Obviously, there are older people who are interested in this field. But generally speaking, if you're listening to this, it's all very well saying, be agile. If you've done things a certain way for 30 years, are you the person who can adapt?
I think this is where people who have stayed on the similar kind of career path and who struggle with adapting to change and who have in the past been very anti-learning new technologies, they're going to struggle, I think, to be able to adapt to work in this new world because we will be using more technology that is laden with AI increasingly in the future.
Arion, what other industries, we talked about medicine briefly now, what other industries do you think in Britain might be benefiting from AI?
Well, so Britain is there's pockets of really impressive innovation coming out of Britain, including its very buoyant startup area where, you've seen these radical technologies come out of particularly the universities, things like DeepMind, which was founded in 2010 and then acquired by Google in 2014 for about $500 million. That's a technology that underpins so much of what Google does. Not only did they build AlphaGo and those technologies that have been involved in taking on top-level chess and Go players, but then it underpins a whole load of things that Google does in the machine learning sphere. Similarly, SwiftKey, which allows you to use your mobile phone to type on a touch screen, Vocal IQ, Magic Pony. There's a bunch of these really key products that have been sold from British industry.
Magic Pony?
Magic Pony is a machine learning tool that was acquired by Twitter a couple of years ago. So there's just this really useful startup scene that the UK is cultivating.
And that's because the government, you see a similar thing in Israel, don't you? The government has encouraged startups to develop. But isn't there a problem in Western countries, Lisa, when you get to the stage that the product's mature, that to actually really use it properly and get all the data you'd need in an ideal world, you'd have to breach liberties that people take for granted as part of those societies?
Yeah, so AI is hungry for data. It has a voracious appetite when it comes to it. And you need huge amounts of data sets, especially in those very early stages where you're training the AI and this machine to kind of learn. So you can imagine, just as a small child starts to learn language and starts to understand the world around them, very early AI systems require the same amount, huge amounts of information to also learn, to be able to actually recognize what is a car and what is an ice cream, for instance. There's a huge amount of time and energy that actually goes into manually tagging content where, again, huge teams of people are involved. And then actually feeding that information into the machine and then actually starting to run these small trials to see, okay, has the machine started to pick up what's an ice cream and what's a car? No, it got these things wrong. And then, a human has to go in and re-tag that.
And have the people supplying the data given their permission.
Have all of that data needs to come from somewhere, and that data is coming from us, right? From the people who are using technologies every day. So things like social listening and using social listening as a method to track the coronavirus, that is looking at conversation that people are sharing on social media every day. And you don't know that every time you're sending out a tweet that has hashtag coronavirus, that could be landing up in a data set that is sitting now with the World Health Organization.
I mean, theoretically, it seems to me the best way to monitor coronavirus now in developed countries would be to get everyone's smart speakers to count how many times people are coughing.
Oh my God.
But that would be...
Yeah, I mean...
You'd have the perfect data set, wouldn't you? And yet people would be uncomfortable about that because they're putting a listening device in their home, 1984 and all the rest of it. The technology exists, it's here.
Yeah, so the way that we collect this data, we need to be very careful about some of the unintended consequences that can come through this. And one of those key things is around creating a surveillance state. The other thing is, where are you collecting this data from? So obviously, if we're collecting this data from the open web, we are not collecting any information from people who are excluded from technology. So there's a huge issue of digital exclusion within this country.
And those could be, of course, the very same people that get coronavirus.
Exactly.
People who don't own smartphones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are pockets in the country that are more connected than others. And so you are only tracking, technically speaking, the places that are very connected, right? So you are not necessarily looking at those places that are excluded from the digital economy.
And talking about the economy, what about the cost for businesses of implementing this technology now? Because across this series, actually, we've been talking about innovations in business that in the long term are obviously going to be economically valuable, cost-cutting things, but actually in the short term are very expensive or actually loss-making to do. Where is AI implementation on that line?
One of the things when you're setting up an AI system, it's not necessarily the cost involved in actually creating the algorithm. The cost is actually in the data. So AI researchers publish their algorithms and, in papers in academic journals. What they don't give freely is actually the training data that was used. So that's where the huge amount of money that comes in. The second cost around this is that AI researchers and data scientists are some of the most highly paid people in technology industry at the moment, and so cost a huge amount of money to bring on board. One of the struggles that we currently have in business is actually keeping our data scientists, because very often organizations are in such a data mess within themselves. So they haven't tracked data properly, they haven't stored it correctly, they haven't labeled it. So the quality of the data that they then provide to these new data scientists that they've just hired at this very high cost is in a state that can't be used. And so what we find is that there's data that shows us, that published in the Financial Times not too long ago, that on average, employed data scientists are spending 1 to 2 hours a week, every week, looking for new jobs.
So there's presumably a role for education in all of this, Arion.
Definitely. And if you look also, there's also a role for government to invest further. The UK may have this sort of thriving startup scene, but its investment in AI is relatively low compared to places like the US and China. The US invests about 50 times more than the UK in AI research, and China about 8 times. The UK is also lagging behind France and Germany and Japan and other places on the number of AI patents that are registered in this country. So there's so much more that is possible to do in the UK, and it does come back to not only education but also government investment.
And Lisa, I've asked this question of basically everyone we've interviewed for this series, but if you're listening to this right now and you run a business, what should you be doing to prepare for this particular forthcoming issue, AI, the dawn of AI?
I think what gets lost in the AI conversation is actually the importance of data, right? And people think that AI is just something that you buy off the shelf like any other tool and you put it into your business and then you have AI. That's not how it works. The very first thing that I would say is you have to have a data strategy. So hire someone who is pretty senior, who has a really solid knowledge of how to put together a data strategy, and actually start understanding what kind of data are you collecting in your business? What is the state of that data? What format is it in? Is it usable? And then what kind of small things can you start to identify in terms of use cases? Because data is just data until you give it meaning. You can have 1 million tweets. It doesn't mean anything. You can have 1 million data points on all of your different customers. It doesn't mean anything until you actually run some kind of analysis on it to give that data meaning. It's totally useless to you.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing some meaning to the data that we've been reading this week. Thank you, Lisa Talia Moretti and Arion McNicoll too. Thanks as well to our sponsor, Lombard, which provides forward-looking finance and expertise to British businesses planning for a prosperous future. This has been the final episode in this particular spin-off series, but for more about agility and innovation in the age of disruption, just visit theweek.co.uk/disruption. I've been Olly Mann. The music is by Tom Morby, the producer Sarah Miles at Rethink Audio. We'll see you again on The Week Unwrapped very soon.